I'd like to welcome you to my in-depth analysis of Order 33, Federal Milk Marketing Order. We're covering some of the information that's come out in the last 30 days to see if we can make some sense of what you're seeing in your milk check and what you might be thinking about and planning for the future here. And I'd like to thank Nobis Agri Science for supporting this podcast. Each month we get 3 different reports summarizing kind of the industry. And the first one is the milk production report. It comes out around the 22nd of the month and covers the previous month. Then we get the cold storage report, which gives us how much of each product is in cold storage. And then finally we get the dairy products report, which allows us to calculate both the production and disappearance of cheese. So each month I kind of put together what I call my trend numbers, and those are basically what's been happening over the last 5 years and how would that project to this next month. And then numerous people like StoneX will give you their actual projections. Now my trend estimates are not actual projections, but simply saying if we do what we've done for the last 5 years, what are we going to get? And then here are the actual numbers that came in this month. One of the problems with these reports is they are quite late. For example, we won't be getting February information until about the 22nd of March. So the best we have right now is the January. So one of the first things that I want to comment about these reports is how you interpret them kind of depends upon your expectation. And so this is some information from StoneX. Again, I'm not trying to discourage StoneX or say that what they're doing is wrong. I just want to point out that they made a comment that this was the first bearish news to hit, the market in a while, and it's because it came in lower than their expectations. This was what they had projected for production of cheese, about 1.15 billion, and we came in at about 1.67 billion, so more cheese than they had actually projected. But the point that they missed is that they did not project the disappearance. I actually calculated that for them off of the numbers that I had, and then the actual disappearance came in very good. So we added very little cheese to stocks. Then more importantly, when we were done looking at the stocks to use, we had 38.5 days of extra cheese available. And they had actually projected more like 39.3, and the trend line was more like 41.0. So when we were all done, I declared this to be a bullish kind of report, and so I gave it a green background here. And just kind of the highlights is, cow numbers were kind of below estimates a little bit. Milk per cow was down a little bit, and milk supply, was down. We increased cold storage, but not by very much. And typically this time of year, we do increase cold storage. But the big news came here, and that is that production was 2% below trend line, while disappearance was 4% above. And so that was a very good number. And again, 38.5 days of excess cheese, where I projected we could have been as high as 41. We'll just kind of look at a couple highlights on this. So these are the cow numbers, and a lot has been made in the industry that we've had a contraction for the last 8 months, and we've killed about 139,000 cows. And you're going to find that I just don't get excited about this because, number one, we should not have been up here at this number of cows to begin with. This is curving off and is probably going to start coming up here, and I'll show you some data supporting that for just a minute. But we're above the cow numbers of where we had really good prices in 2019, and we're below the cow numbers where we had poor prices in 2018. So in my opinion, we need to get these down here just a little bit. So let's look at the culling numbers, because that's kind of our best estimate of what's happening to the herd. And so this last week, we're down about 6,400 cows year over year. But if you look at the slaughter numbers, 2020, 2021 in red and 2022 in deep blue, they're kind of all running together. And this is from DFA. And to me, the most important part is when we look at year to date, we're down about, 20,000 cows. So that says that actually the herd is probably going to be expanding here soon. So the reason I get excited about this is a graph that I've pulled together looking at days of excess cheese at the end of the month, and then what was the cheese price the following month. Because if we have a lot of excess cheese, cheese tends to come down in price, keep everything in balance. And a couple of things come out of this. Is the only time we've had above $2 cheese with 38 days of excess cheese is during the pandemic. So I'm not going to get excited about that number. And actually a couple of these up here in the pandemic also. But one of the things that becomes clear is we've not had $2 cheese, very often in the last 5 years. So here is the million-dollar question that I think everybody's got to be looking at. So this is the last 5 years of cheese prices. And again, we had very good cheese prices in 2019, not so good in 2018. And then we had a pandemic, which I tend to ignore because that was all driven by government purchases. So it's been very, very hard to get above $1.80 and really hard to get above $2. And here are future prices as of Friday. We are looking at several months of $2.23 for cheese. And so my question is, what forces need to be in place to get $2 cheese in March and $2.21 in April? Because that's not going to happen simply because feed cost went up or simply because of inflation. We've got to figure out exactly what's going to make that happen. And to me, it is all about disappearance. Everybody loves to talk about supply, how to get more milk out of cows, these sorts of things. And I just came back from a conference, where we had 2 days of that, but never once did we talk about how are we going to get, more cheese to disappear, or how we're going to increase the demand of cheese. And I just took this picture about an hour ago, and this is the part that kind of stood out to me. Is there are $6.49 for New York sharp cheddar, but it's on sale right now at $5.99. That's telling me that supplies are actually pretty strong, and that demand has been a little bit weak here. So the other piece that everybody talks about is the fact that we export cheese, and the export cheese price is really good right now. It's like $3.16 or something, just really crazy high. But here's the information that just came out from dairy today, and we did export 6.49 million pounds of cheese in January. So let's do just a little bit of math. 6.4 million pounds of cheese. We made 1.16 billion pounds of cheese. That says we exported 5.56% of the cheese that we produced. So the question is the export price actually going to be one that's going to drive up the domestic price? And I have a feeling that consumers are not going to stand for that. So here are your February class component numbers. These came out about 2 weeks ago. Our class 3 was $20.91, that's up 53 cents. Our class 4 was 24, that was up 91 cents. And you can see these individual prices, butterfat up 7, protein down about 4, and other solids up about 7. At this recording, which is Saturday night, I've not seen your February statistical uniform prices yet. I'm going to project them with about $1.09 PPD in Cleveland, which is going to give us, about a 22.03 statistical uniform price. And this is actually the January price at 21.34. And I mean, this is up quite a bit from where we've been, for the last year. So again, we're in very good milk prices, and I don't want to be accused of thinking that milk prices are going to come crumbling down on us. I just don't think they're going to stay as high as they are right now. So if we look at percent fat for the order 33, and again, you guys are just constantly ratcheting this up a little bit. We're just figuring out how to get more fat, less actual milk. Protein is the same way. We probably should have been coming down on protein percentages, and it held flat, but again, our peaks and our valleys are all trending a little bit higher. So again, you're getting more fat, more protein, which is going to drive up your price, except it doesn't help with the oversupply. So I just wanted to take a minute and look at what has happened to your milk price for the last year in order 33. I know there's lots of data on here, but I'm going to try to just highlight a few things. We start January 21, end up January 22 is where we have all the data. And this is the total milk price per hundredweight given the average fat, average protein of farms in order 33. So right away you can see that there's about $7 better in milk price, compared to what it was a year ago. And this difference number is how does this total actually compare to your statistical uniform price. And so the more of that difference, that means that you've got more fat and protein and more components. To me, the really startling thing is a year ago, on 100 pounds of milk, fat made up $6.25. Today, it's $12.24. So fat is just absolutely driving the bus on these milk prices. Protein came down, just about $2, and then fluid went up about, $4, $3.50, and that's because other solids prices have gone up, and then class 4 has gone up, which ends up in the fluid price. But again, look at this difference, and close to $7 and hundredweight, and a huge chunk of that is in this fat price. So if butter actually starts dropping, all these milk prices are going to be in jeopardy. And so if we look across the nation, this is how the statistical uniform prices increased for January. The average was $2.02, and you guys were $1.98, which is a decent increase. Not as high as the Northeast at $2.25, a little bit higher than Florida, and that's just because of a timing issue with them. And then we got $2.06 over here and $2.37 up here in the Northwest. One of the big issues with Order 33 is the depooling. And so these are your class 4 utilization. So you're about 8%. So you've been as high, in the 20s somewhere in here. So you're depooling class 4. And it seems like Order 33 just doesn't want to have a high statistical uniform price because they're either always depooling class 3 or depooling class 4. And the significance of that is if you're in a co-op that is depooling, you're going to get a separate check in the mail from all that milk that was depooled. But if you're shipping to a co-op that did not depool, you in fact may not get that and have a lower price. And so it's important that if your co-op is not depooling, that you really ask some questions about how the order is being run. And the fact that other farms may be getting a big benefit of the depooling and you're getting more of the negative of it. And again, so here are the statistical uniform prices. You were $21.34. The Northeast was $22.74. And I often hear the comment, New York's got much higher milk prices. That's actually not true, even though it looks that way. So on your class 3, you add $2. We add $3.25 to the federal order 1, which means we have higher deductions out in the counties where you might have lower deductions. So you really can't compare these two back and forth. So if we look at how the futures are looking right now, class 3 is below class 4, and it looks like it's going to stay that way, all the way through early 2023. Remember that class 4 is non-fat dry milk and butter. Class 3 is cheese, whey, and butter, much less on butter than cheese and whey. And it looks like the top milk prices are going to be somewhere in this category here. So, April, May, June, somewhere in there, and then they're going to begin trickling off. But that's assuming that we can hold these cheese prices and that we can hold these non-fat dry milk and butter prices. And right now, non-fat dry milk is starting to come down a little bit. And like I said, I've got real questions about these cheese prices if they're going to hold. All right, I'll jump into weather just a little bit, which then brings us into crops. And this is a slide that I took straight off of the Climate Prediction Center today. So to get everybody oriented, here is the US, here is South America. This blue region here is the cold water off the west coast of South America. And this has been what's called the La Nina effect, and we've had it for 2 winters now. And what tradition would tell you is that this should kind of fade and that should become warm water. We usually go 1 year La Nina and then El Nino. But right now there's starting to be a lot of chatter that this La Nina is actually getting stronger again. And so if this gets stronger, this can have several ramifications. Number one, the winds tend to blow that way, which means that Brazil is going to have a drought later this year like what they had last year. It's probably going to keep the western part of the U.S. in a drought scenario. And for you guys, basically, this upcoming summer would be pretty much a mirror image of last summer. So we'll look at these contracts. As you know, this Ukrainian invasion by Russia has just driven these markets crazy. And so we started out the year, just about $6 on corn, and we've just kind of ratcheted up to $7.62. Without basis, that's about $60 increase per ton. And if we're feeding about 8 pounds of cornmeal a day, that gets about 24 cents a cow a day in increased feed cost. Now in soybean meal, it kind of started up before the Russian invasion, but it's gone back up here to $4.77, and the close-up months actually were over $500 for a couple days this last week. But overall, we've seen about an $80 increase in soybean meal, which is 32 cents a cow a day, feeding about 8 pounds of protein. So again, if we take this 24, we add it to this 32, that's going to give us 56 cents of added feed cost just in protein and energy since the first of the year. And I hope by now that most everybody has their protein and energy booked in for the year. Got a number of farms that got down here in this range at 340. When you talk about good milk prices and protein at 340 and corn at 230, it's just a really good situation. April heating oil is one that I kind of keep an eye on. This is a proxy for on-farm diesel. So it's going to get an idea of what it's going to cost you to fill those diesel tanks to go do spring work. Again, we were looking very happy at $2 here. We got to $2.80 until the invasion. We were clear up to $4.44. This dropped back now a full dollar. And so the question that we were asking right now, is this a place where we should try to lock in heating oil if you've not locked it in? Or is it going to come down? And part of the question is what's going to happen with the temperatures. Right now, the forecasts are for warm spring, but there are some hints that there could be a little bit of cold weather coming. The more cold weather we have is going to drive this heating oil up. And the longer that this conflict continues and the more that people ban the Russian oil is going to drive this back up again. So I think there's probably more upside risk to the heating oil number than there is downside risk. Now, one of the things that we got to keep an eye on, this is the March U.S. dollar index, and it actually closes on Monday. But throughout the summer, we just kept saying if this gets over 93, that's going to be really bad for exports. Like we kind of blew through that, and it's a lot of chatter about, well, if this can stay at 96, that's going to be better for exports than anything higher. And we're flirting, with that 98, 99. Again, there's a rush towards the U.S. dollar because it's much stronger than everybody else right now. But the U.S. dollar being strong just makes our exports that much harder to export, because our price of cheese is got not only the transport to get it overseas, but also the fact that we're selling in U.S. dollars and very strong against either the euro or any of these other currencies. So milk marketing is, a very complicated subject, and I guess my biggest concern right now is everybody is getting excited about all these high prices coming, and if you're going to be budgeting on them and planning on them, then you probably ought to try to lock them in some way, shape, or form, because there is a chance that these could come crumbling down here if these days of surplus cheese, start hitting 40 days again, then somebody's got to deal with all this excess cheese. So I hope this information was helpful to you. And again, I want to thank Nobis Agri Science, kind of in cooperation with Balchem, to provide these podcasts for you. And I'll get you more information next month.